Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Audit Committee at 7 o'clock on Wednesday, the 10th of July 2024. I'm Alice Brady, your chair for this evening. There's no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. In the event of an evacuation, please muster outside Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. The meeting is being minuted, recorded and audio live streamed via the Council's website. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked at sunset, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall through the side exit behind the glass door. Item 1, apologies for absence. Sarah, do we have any apologies?
Apologies from Councillor Robin Franklin, Chair.
Thank you. And do we have any substitutes?
No substitutes, Chair.
Thank you, sir. Item 3, declarations of interest by members or officers. Do we have any declarations in advance?
No declarations, Chair.
Thank you. And are there any further declarations from the floor? No, thank you. Item 4, this is to agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of March 2024 as a true record. Can I have this by general assent, please? Agreed. Thank you. Item 5, I just need to confirm with Sarah, there are no public speakers for this meeting.
No public speakers, Chair.
Thank you. And we move on to item 6, which is the Auditor's Annual Report, and that's 2023. This is to note the report from the Service Director of Finance, Procurement and Head of Finance. I invite Sophia Brown, we've got from Grant Thornton and Rob May, Head of Finance, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I shall take the report as read. If I direct your attention to page 17 of the papers, we have here a summary of the work and the findings that we have made in the 22-23 value for money work. You'll notice that things have remained stable in the areas of governance and improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. And we've noticed a worsening of arrangements in financial sustainability, identifying one significant weakness in arrangements, and that has resulted in a key recommendation. So I will take you through the key recommendation. That's on page 20 of the pack. It's in relation to the HRA working balance. We found that during 22-23, there was reliance on HRA reserves to support unplanned revenue spending in the HRA, particularly in relation to repairs and maintenance, and that the Council was not able to deliver the identified savings for the HRA in 22-23. So the level of the HRA working balance is the threshold recommended by the Council is 1.5 million. And the balance is below that level. So we wanted to flag it to your attention because there is a risk now of deficit budgets in future years. And also we did note that HRA financial reports provided to members did have inaccuracies in relation to the HRA working balance levels and use of earmarked reserves. Now there is further detail on that on page 25 of the pack. And over the page on page 21, you will see management's comments in relation to our recommendation, which is at the top of page 20. So there are specific bullet points where we've made specific recommendations and actions to the Council. So I might want to stop there for any questions before I go on for the rest of the report.
Thank you. This is to note. So do we have any questions from the floor? Come in, Councillor Smith.
Just to double check, make sure I'm clear from the report, as I've only just seen it in the agenda, that what the deficit was in that, or the shortfall. It's not really a deficit; it's a shortfall. But and obviously you've got some things in place to resolve that. But it would just be helpful to know what the ASAP position was going forwards from this position.
Thank you, Councillor. So on page 25 of the pack, under the part of that page that says HRA, the housing revenue account, it goes into detail about what the original budget was, what the overspend about that on that budget was, and that the level of the working balance now is 0.6 million. So that's quite far below the target HRA working balance level of 1.5 million set by the council to ensure that the HRA remains sustainable.
So I take it that comes from the overspend 0.3, the underachievement in rent 0.2, and then the bad debt 0.1. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's part of it that makes up the difference.
Do we have any more questions on that section? Did you say you were going to present more of this? And then I think we'll take more of the questions at the end.
And then in addition to the key recommendation, there are also improvement recommendations for all three of the areas of review. So we have improvement recommendations for financial sustainability, pages 36 to 41. For governance, pages 47 to 50, and the 3Es, pages 54 to 56. And if there are any specific questions on those, I can pick those up. Just to flag also, pages 57 to 60 of the papers have our follow-up of the improvement recommendations we made in the 21-22 Auditor's Annual Report. So we've noted there where improvement recommendations are closed, but also where they remain open, how they link to the improvement recommendations in this report. And I will stop there for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions from the floor? Yes, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. It's only just to just to mention on the report saying that the cyber incident is held things back, and obviously we're getting back on track. So, sort of, how held back do you feel that it is before everything gets back updated and move forward again?
So as part of our work programme for 23-24, we will be looking at that. I do know it is holding things back in relation to preparation of the 23-24 financial statements. Just to give you an update on the audit for this year, I shared with management an indicative audit plan for 23-24. I sent that on Monday, so it was too late to be included in the papers. But we are making progress on that front to make sure that we get back on track with the audits of the financial statements. I just discussed with Rob here about the timetable for getting that back on track. But I think maybe if Rob gives an update on where things are with the cyber incident and getting back on track, that might be helpful. Thank you.
Do you want to come in, Rob?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we still do. We're not at business as usual. We're definitely not. The trouble with the kind of finance side of things is so many services feed into it. We're quite often the last to catch up because that's the way the processing works. We have a deadline of October when auditors are coming out. We're confident we'll hit that deadline. That's the deadline we're really working to. I would estimate we're 1 or 2 months behind catching up.
Do we have any more questions from the floor? I have a couple of questions on, I'm using the page numbers from your audit, not from the agenda. So the 6 improvement recommendations under the financial governance, and that's detailed on 22 to 27. We've got page 7 where we've got management comments, and that lists the actions to mitigate for that. Do you think those actions go far enough? More generally, when we're looking at recommendation tracking, under the recommendation list, you say quite rightly that it's this committee's purpose and duty to monitor the implementation progress. So do you suggest that for the officers to have a separate document which clearly states the recommendations and where we are with progress? And do you think that would be something that this committee should be taking forward so it makes it a lot clearer where we are along that timeline? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So your first question around do the actions go far enough? I think they're quite detailed. Nikki and team took took an appropriate amount of time to go through the issues to come up with a good plan of action. I think the council's not alone in terms of low HRA balances and it being quite a significant issue going forward. It is something we're seeing across the sector. So it might be worth seeing what others are doing as well to see if there are any ideas or additional actions that can be implemented. But I think it will be key when we see the outturn for 23-24, what's changed since this time of reporting for 22-23. In terms of recommendation tracking, quite often for audit committees, there'll be a separate paper that's brought to each meeting that includes not only external audit recommendations, so recommendations from the auditor's annual report and the audit findings reports, but also for internal audit recommendations as well. So you have an overview as a whole, how recommendations are being implemented, actions are being implemented and resolved as you go. And I think sometimes if you have a view that not much progress is being made, then it's quite good to have it all in one document.
Sure, thank you. I think we have that in table form from the internal auditors, and that's really quite clear. But I don't think we have that document. So maybe that's something to take forward for this committee. Also, you mentioned, well, you didn't mention, but I think it's really important, as you say, to track what happens. So the previous recommendations, which are on page 44 to 46, it doesn't read very clearly. Some of them where it says, has it been actions, it says no, and the next section it says, go to recommendation 6 or go to recommendation 7, and then it says yes. I'm just wondering, so looking at that list of recommendations, does that mean that all of those have been actioned and taken on board?
You, Chair. So I think in the column where it says, has it been addressed, yes or no? If it says yes, then we don't have any further actions. Then I think, so in some instances it says, has it been addressed? No. Is there further action? Yes. And then we point to the most relevant improvement recommendation in this year's report, which encompasses the way forward.
Okay. Thank you for that explanation. I think it's quite clear. I think from that explanation, I think that's something to take forward to make it a lot clearer. So one of your recommendations is fundamentally that this committee can track progress. And I think that just needs to be a lot easier for members to see, so we can get on top of that. So if that can be something the committee takes forward. Councillor Smith?
Yes, just to add to that, because I agree completely with what you just said, that it's also the context of this. Obviously, we took the housing back into the council control, so there's an underlying background issue where this monitoring of what's happening going forward is going to become really important. And I think that's, especially at this particular time frame.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. So if we can pop that in the minutes and see if we can action that, that'd be great. So this is to note the report, and we can do that by general assent. Do we agree that by general assent? Agreed. Thank you. We're going to move on to item 7, which is East Kent Audit Partnership, Internal Audit Annual Reports 23-24, and that's pages 66 to 81. And this is to consider the report, and we have Christopher Parker, Deputy Head of East Kent Audit Partnership, and Christine Parker, the Head of East Kent Audit Partnership. And I invite you to introduce the item, the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. If I take you, please, to page 66 of the member pack, the paragraph 1 there sets out the purpose and the objective of my annual report. The bullet points there, each hopefully having then been achieved as we walk through the report, and it's very important. We talk about the internal audit standards quite a lot at this committee. It's very important that we achieve all of these bullet points to comply with the standards, and I'll come back to that later in the agenda. So firstly, my presentation is really in 2 parts. Firstly, to explain the coverage during the year that's been undertaken, to be able to confirm that sufficient assurance work has been completed to be able to provide an opinion to you, and how that compares to what we agreed back in March last year when we set out the plan of work ahead of for the next 12 months. So what we did and what we didn't do, and how we have performed as a team against our targets using the performance indicators on all the metrics that we have set. And then secondly, to effectively take a backward look over the context of the last 4 meetings. There's nothing new slipped in here. You've seen all the results of the work that we've presented to you over the last 4 meetings, but then this is a slightly different view of what that looks like. So to that end, if I take you to paragraph 3 in the report, that leads you through the first part, which is the performance of the East Kent Audit Partnership as a team. The highlights really, and the summary is there on page 80 to 81 in the form of our balanced scorecard. But the highlights really include the overall plan completion and plan coverage for the 4 partners is at 93%. We did have a vacancy in the year that affected us slightly. And we also achieved a saving to all the partners across the year of £18,000, and we have suggested how that will be returned to the partners in the current year. We rolled it over into 24/5. One of the other key points to mention from the balanced scorecard is the external quality assessment and the mentioning there that we generally conforms. And again, that's a later item on the agenda, members, so I will come back to that later. In the report itself, going back to section 4, that provides the overview of the work that we have undertaken in the year to lead to this opinion. And again, this is giving you the 3 views that I explained. So we're looking at all the risks that we've raised throughout the year, what the assurances were on the individual pieces of work at the time of doing the initial audit. And then quite often we say the most important part of the story is, so what? What changed as a result of this? And that leads on to the section headed up with the follow-up. So the progress reports, when we come back 3 or 6 months later after agreeing the action plan with managers, how well have those recommendations been implemented? That is an important part. We were just talking about tracking recommendations. And if we now move to the section 5, the overall opinion, we have 5.1, the corporate governance opinion, which is a solid compliance opinion. And in section 5.2, these are the areas that we have reported during the year and escalated to the committee where there were concerns after follow-up. These matters, so there's 8. 7 of those will be again tracked and reported back through the committee when they become due for follow-up again. And then one area under review, which was limited at the time of the original audit that is yet to be followed up, is the housing and responsive repairs and maintenance review. So I'm placing a firm opinion that management have a track record of implementing these recommendations and can place assurance on the aspects of control we have covered in the year. And then finally, the risk management opinion. And we've seen a change, a refresh of the information presented to this committee, and good progress has been made in introducing that. So the next review, the independent review of risk management, is included in the 25-26 plan. So until then, we are placing good reliance on those systems and procedures that are in place. Anything that we have highlighted in this report, members, should be reflected in the annual governance statement. This is the annual governance statement, of course, does take assurances from all other sources of assurance. Internal audit is one key area, and that would be the story where the place where the story is picked up and tells what any steps that might be being taken to rectify any issues or trends that have been detected. The report is for noting and for what's the recommendation? Sorry. To note and accept the opinion of internal audit, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Christine. I propose a resolution from the chair. This committee accepts the opinion of the head of Audit Partnership and notes the annual report detailing the work of the East Kent Audit Partnership and its performance to underpin the 23-24 opinion and make comments, if required, to full council. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Smith. I open up to the floor for any questions. I take that no questions from the floor. Within the report, it says that the partnership's been locked out of Canterbury systems due to the cyber attack. I'm just wondering, this is for officers, when do we know when that's going to be rectified? And for Christine, what does locked out actually mean and how is that impacting your work? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the mention is in paragraph 4.5, where we're talking about the completion of the plan. So 88% completion at Canterbury for last year was impacted by, firstly, our vacancy in the team, and also the issue that we have with being unable to carry out some work. Members will know, of course, of the cyber incident that happened in January, and then since then, the council has migrated to Office MS 365. In the process of those things, it's inevitable, really, that the council has focused on its own internal staff first, and we're playing catch up. I have news: we are being issued with new devices on the 2nd of August, and that will rectify our ability to get to the virtual private network, to be able to undertake our interrogations of all the systems that we need access to be able to do our work. So it's whilst we've been tolerating this for a while now, there is a date from which it will be solved. So thank you, Chair. It's good news.
That's really positive, really good to hear. Thank you. I think I'll just come in before Councillor Smith. Is this on the lockout, or is this on a different topic? Yep, Councillor Smith.
It was just a case of perhaps that, obviously, that you've outlined progress on that, on handling the cyber incident, that this should perhaps be noted under its own point in the report, because I think it is a very important issue, and it does show the vulnerability of this kind of system to something that was beyond your control, and it's and it is something that this committee and others in the council will need to act upon due to whatever the circumstances result from that, and the difficulties that each of you that deal with these kind of things have to play out on. Thank you.
Christine?
Thank you, Chair. Indeed, I have briefed and escalated the matter to the Section 151 officer, who in turn has logged the calls on our behalf to get this matter rectified, which is now well and truly in progress. It was my intention, as it's mentioned in paragraph 4.5 of the report, to highlight it to the committee if it continued to impair our ability to undertake the work. The figures for Q1, where we've continued to deliver, we've been actively trying to continue to deliver the audits. It's just affected the scheduling. Clearly, we couldn't do everything in Q4. We needed to manage to get on with some of the work, and the figures for Q1 are already looking okay. So we will be able to catch up. Any issues impacting our ability to complete the plan, of course, would come to you in the quarterly report, members. We wouldn't keep you in the dark. Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I mean, that's good to hear, but it's, I think my point was, I mean, this is a public document, and we need clarity for, anyone who does need to delve into it. Whilst it is in there, as you say, having it as its own point in there makes it stand out, would give a greater weight to the potential risk, because it is a significant risk what's just happened. Thank you.
I'll come in on that. If we have this detailed in the minutes as an important point that needs to be signposted, with that, yep, thank you. And I think for this committee, we just need to have eyes on the limited assurance, the housing void management and housing capital programme, the recommendations, and how that's going along in future reports. Thank you. So this is to vote on. It's not by general assent. So if we can take a vote, please.
Vote carried unanimously.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, councillors. And thank you for your report. I think we're going back to you. East Kent Audit Partnership Internal Quarterly Audit Report. And this is to consider, and I believe we're going to Christopher, are we? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the report before you on page 82 is the regular internal audit update report showing the work that's been completed since the last committee meeting. On page 85, this details the 3 main reviews that were completed in the period, council tax reduction scheme being substantial, climate change update being reasonable and contract standing orders also being reasonable. On page 87, this shows the follow-up for the period. There were 3 follow-ups completed, the main one of note being counter-fraud arrangements, which was originally limited and is still limited at the moment. This was suffered from delays, and this is mentioned on page 88, where it shows that the implementation of the counter-fraud arrangements recommendations have been hindered by the recent cyber incident. The council has experienced also a period of vacant posts within the finance team. This situation is beginning to improve, with headway being made to recover from the cyber incident, and also appointments have been made in respect to the vacant finance posts, with 2 principal accountants due to take up their posts in the near future. And I believe some of the fraud arrangements will be split between those post holders. Then moving on to page 98. This shows the plan of work completed to the end of May, and I can just update those figures for you. To the end of June, Canterbury has now completed 25% of the plan and EKS 27% of the plan against a target of 25. So therefore those are on track at the moment. They are the main points from the review, and be pleased to take any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. I propose the resolution that this committee accepts the results of the internal audit work and makes comments if required to full council. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Smith. And I open up to the floor for any questions. No questions from the floor, I think. So I'm just going to comment this. So there's been 3 audits carried out, and they've been allocated assurance levels of substantial, so that's the council tax reduction scheme, and 2 reasonable, so that's climate change update and contract standing orders. It mentions in the document that there's 3 recommendations from the climate change review update audit from November 2022 that have not been completed. I'm just wondering if we can have eyes on what those are, and then from officers, maybe after the meeting, if you don't have any information on what's going to be done to complete those. And I think, so most of the outstanding counter-fraud recommendations, they're going to be looking to be implemented on the 31st of March 2025, all of them by that date. It looks like most of them. So I'm just wondering why that date is specific. Why are others not getting updated, or those recommendations being implemented beforehand? Do we know? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. From my knowledge, the 3 older recommendations from the climate change update, one of them relates to the completion of environmental impact assessment forms. The second one is in relation to carbon deficit position regarding the new local plan. And the third one is in relation to the corporate plan update and working with other bodies such as the Canterbury Climate Change Partnership. They're the main headings of those 3 older recommendations. Regarding the fraud position with the fraud arrangements, I believe the timing of those has been put there so that Nikki Mills can make sure that the recommendations are implemented by that time. I think she's quite conscious that they are outstanding, but now that things are slowly moving forward from the cyber incident, and also these new principal accountants are going to be in post, I think she was just wary of giving too short a timescale for this work to be implemented, because she does feel that obviously the counter-fraud arrangements are an important aspect, and does want them to be included and covered off properly.
Thank you, Christopher. I think for officers, I think the local plan and the corporate plan, there's obvious reasons why we can't implement those, but I think the first one you mentioned, I think we just need to know a time frame for when that can be implemented. So thank you for the report. And this is to go to a vote. If you can vote, please.
Vote carried unanimously with 7 votes, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, councillors, and thank you for the report. Let's move to item 9, which is external quality assessment of internal audit update report. That's pages 102 to 134. This is to note the report, and I go to either Christopher or Christine. I'll go to Christine to introduce this. Thank you.
Thank you. Last one from me, I promise. Members, if I could take you to page 102 of the report, and to introduce it, I'd really like to draw attention to paragraph 2.1, 2 and 3 and 4. The public sector internal audit standards, as I would pizzazz, are in place until next year. And one of the requirements of PSAS is to undertake an external quality assessment. And you will note that it was one of the recommendations highlighted by Grant Thornton in the governance report from the year before, where they'd identified that we hadn't undertaken the external quality assessment with an independent reviewer. We had previously relied on undertaking the self-assessment, and because we work to 4 Section 1 5 officers across the 4 councils within the partnership, their review of that self-assessment had been relied upon until that date. But it was quite right that we undertook the external assessment, and this was arranged for in March of this year. So I think it's really important, and it's a shame that we've probably done the agenda in this order, because we've just asked you to place assurance on our work, and now we're telling you, oh, you can, because here's the quality, here's the badge, here's telling you that we have complied with standards in performing that work. But it is important for you to understand how well we conform with the standards. And to that end, we have a scale of a possible rating of doesn't conform, partially conforms, or the top one, the really, the badge you really want to wear, is generally conforms. So it's not terribly exciting, members, but I would like to take you through to paragraph 3.2, where I think some highlights from the full report that is appended to this have come in. And the assessor did speak to me, having completed the assessment, and did sum it up as, for a small team working across a partnership of 4 councils, you're really punching above your weight. And I like the bar chart on the bottom of page 103 that demonstrates that. So the average for local government is shown in blue, and our score for the East Kent Audit Partnership is shown in orange, and we are above average in all apart from standard 2,300. Which, if you go to the table below on paragraph 104, gives you a little bit more information about what standard 2,300 is. Of course, there is an action plan, and I think, just talking through the report, the actions that have been identified have been explained to me in 2 parts. One, to stretch our already existing good current performance of complying with the standards, but to stretch that even further. A majority of those recommendations start with the word consider, even to the point where we have a matrix, and we have the identified control, the risk and the objective, and one of them is consider putting those in a different order. So it's very, very detailed that the level of the assessor has gone into, and he's talking about really stretching our level of compliance by just talking about risk first rather than talking about control first, which we understand. Another one is talking about our language within our report, which Christopher has just presented to you, with the definitions. We have the 4 assurance levels, and we have obviously critical, high, medium and low risks, and the assessor is suggesting that we dovetail that risk matrix to the council's risk matrix. Well, that sounds a very good idea. The issue that we have is each of the 4 councils that we work to have a different matrix. Some have a 3x3, 4x4, 5x5. So we will consider these recommendations, and we will look to try and make our jargon more like your jargon when we're talking about risk management. When we've done the presentations before, members, you'll recall, when we're talking about a risk to, I don't know, the payroll system, this isn't necessarily going to be a corporate risk that pulls the council down in a terrible way. So our perception of risk within the individual systems that we're looking at is different, and we are using a different sort of scale really to the corporate risk register that you see regularly. But all of that is quite theoretical and interesting if you like this stuff. But the highlight from this is these recommendations are made to kind of further stretch us and consider how well how we can improve those things. The other point I'd like to make is about the timing of this. We couldn't have timed it actually better. I know Grant Thornton have picked us up for not having done it before now, but we've timed it. So we have completed the assessment against the PSAS, the public sector internal audit standards that are outgoing, and ahead of the new global internal audit standards that are incoming from next year, which gives us another 4 years before we have to do an external assessment against the new standards. This is important because the new standards are still being sort of consulted on within the profession. The local government application note of how we will interpret these standards is also still being written in the matrix. What they have done is change the wording to must do. Some of the standards said should, and now they say must. And for small teams, say for example, in the charity sector, there might be one auditor. So there's going to be a lot of challenge on some of these areas where they say you must do things. So this assessment also kind of did a gap analysis. Well, this is where you're positioned now, and this is what the future looks like, and the things you might need to stretch to be able to comply with the global standards going forward. So obviously we will be taking the action plan forward. We will be looking at bringing in my next annual report at least a tracker against what we have done, what we've considered and decided we won't do, or where we're at with some of those. The full assessment, as I say, is included as the appendix within the committee report. I'm very happy to take any questions if the members have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. And this is to notes. Do we have any comments from the floor? Come in, Councillor Smith.
You mentioned, obviously, the different local authorities have different systems. I think that's cropped up before when you're trying to collate data from these things. When the overall performance seems fine to me, but if, in terms of obviously there's a gap analysis going on. There's a general trend in the way the approach that's required is to improve the situation across the board, and because you have kind of differing sources to do that, is that something that perhaps would allow you to present improvements from different areas of the local authorities that you look after, to see which would be best, and also to actually try and unify the data systems as much as can be done. Obviously they are different, but sometimes the terminology and things can be matched, the fields used can be matched and so on, so you end up with a more coherent approach going forward than is currently the case.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yes, I think perhaps if I could take you to paragraph 3.5 in the report. This is talking very much about how we have scored as a team in complying with the standards. So there's a possible score of 0 through to 3. Our score is 2.61. The average score is 2.53. That's all sectors. And the range in our sector peers is between 219 and 271. So the best performing team in local government was 2.71 and we're at 2.61. As I say, he concluded that particularly for a small team working across a shared service with those challenges that one size doesn't always fit all, we are better than most and doing a good job. So I like the direction of travel that his recommendations are trying to take that in. So it's already from a very, very good position, better than average, nearly at the top of your sphere. However, it could look even better if, and I think because the new global standards don't come in until January and we're still getting clarity on what they look like. I mean, for one example, we need to have a strategy. We currently have a charter, and when you look at what the draft strategy looks like, it's the charter renamed, but if you were a team, if you were an audit team delivering internal audit to 74 local authorities, a strategy would look quite different to a strategy written with 7 staff. And I think this is the scalability bit that the profession hasn't yet understood. But we will digest it and attend the webinars and get the professional advice and obviously try to deliver these recommendations. But we have a little while now before we need to be externally assessed again. That's not to say I won't be trying to achieve the standards. Obviously we will be. I hope that reassures you where we're at.
Thank you, Christine. This is good news. So this is really commendable that you've reached the highest rating that's available. And on behalf of the committee here, I think that's a well done. If that could be referenced and noted within the minutes. Thank you. Moving on to item 10, informing the external audit risk assessment, pages 135, 134. This is to consider the report, and I invite Rob to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. So as part of the planning work for the 23-24 audit, Grant Thornton asked a series of questions around key events during the year, accounting policies and risk areas. The questions are answered by the management team, but before a final version is provided to the auditors, there is a requirement to show the responses to this committee. This is to aid the two-way communication between those charged with governance and the auditors. Appendix 1 on page 137 and 2 on page 144 show these draft responses, and we ask for any additional comments or approval for it to be submitted to the auditors. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I propose the responses shown in the appendix to be provided to the Council's external auditors. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Smith. And I open this up to the floor for any questions. I don't have any questions. I think it's just for us to see what the auditors say about the responses, and then we can comment on at a later date. So this is to vote by a recorded vote. So if you could vote, please.
Vote carried unanimously, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. We'll now move on to item 11. This is the RIP Act 2000. This is to note a verbal report from Jan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can confirm that there are no new RIPA matters. You may remember this is a legislative, sets out all the legislation in relation to covert surveillance, and it's to ensure that taking action is not in breach of human rights of the public. So there's been no new matters, and this is merely for noting.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the floor? No new matters. This is, we can do this by general assent. Is that agreed? Thank you, councillors. We now move on to item 12, update report on the strategic risk register. That's pages 155 to 182, and this is to consider the report given by Rob May, the Head of Finance.
Thank you, Chair. So this is the usual standard item on the agenda to communicate the current risks facing the Council for you to note and comment on. The document found at Appendix 2 is considered weekly by management team, with focus being on those that are assessed to be high or medium. Following feedback from the last Audit Committee, we have made some changes to the format of the register. To highlight how the risks are scored, we have moved the two components to the front page, being likelihood of an event occurring and impact should that event occur. We have also provided a RAG rating to the total score and also showed the score that was last reported to you. The highest score items have not moved and are unlikely to change, particularly in relation to cybersecurity and budgetary constraints, both areas that we have little influence over in the current environment. We do, however, have two areas where we do feel we have impacted the risk. One area is Nowlat Canterbury Environment Company have built up a track record of delivering a satisfactory service. The likelihood of that service being disrupted has been assessed to be lower. And secondly, we have reduced the risk of workforce shortages. Our recruitment process has been more successful lately, and we have seen progress on lowering turnover of staff. Finally, after comments at the March Audit Committee meeting regarding concerns on homelessness, this concern was passed back to the Service Director. You should have received an email this morning addressing these concerns with various resources for further information, and I hope this has helped, and I'll take any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. I propose a resolution to note the current position and to make comments If required to full, council can have a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Smith. And I open this up to the floor for questions. Councillor Smith.
Regarding the cyber incident, as a risk, it's something that sort of particularly came up as an issue last week, whereas when the planning committee was cancelled at late stage, and I believe that was related to the cyber incident with systems going down. And this is a kind of a compulsory, a statutory committee. So, so there is a, when it begins to affect something like planning, I think I don't know if there's a way of separating out the risks, the cyber risk into that which is we have heavy legal obligation to do in a set time scale, and that which is less of a legal obligation to do and has a looser time scale. So you have a kind of lower and an upper rating between the two and treat them slightly differently. And I'm thinking this may be a prudent thing to do, given that should such a thing, God forbid, ever occur again, and that is entirely possible, that we have a focus in our risk structure and our way of dealing with things on the core, absolutely essential parts of the council's activities against the less essential. So I don't know.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Jen, would you like to answer?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my understanding of that incident is that it was not at all connected to the cyber incident. It was a separate issue. Unfortunately, a third party, because of course we've got various different systems, did something with the best of intentions, which actually took out our access. And I understand that it was a painstaking job for our IT colleagues to resolve, very lengthy. So it's just a really odd one-off incident that unfortunately they tried very hard to resolve during the day, but it just wasn't possible in time. I hope that helps.
Councillor Smith.
It does help, but I think it doesn't. In effect, rather than illustrating the most difficult point I was trying to make, you've illustrated the other side, the weaker point. That would have been a lower priority incident in that sense, because your explanation is helpful. Thank you. But should such a thing have blocked something that was statutory or with a required timeline, any kind of cyber incident, then my point is that we need to distinguish between the two. Cyber is not a single thing in this sense.
So would it be true to say that from this cyber incident, now there's a hierarchical scale of what systems need to be prioritised and what systems don't? Is that what you're trying to say?
But I'm not sure even if that was in place, how that would have made anything different on this occasion. Unfortunately, it's just a very random incident.
I think you're talking about recovery, system recovery following a cyber.
Yes, I am talking about that, but I'm also talking about system resilience in the sense of how you can cut these parts off from a cyber attack, and how you can, and then obviously makes them easier to reinstate at a later stage. If there's any backup systems, to have a separated backup that's less infected and so on. So there are a whole series of potentials depending on, I mean, I'm not an IT specialist, but the nature of the way IT works, there are a whole series of possible ways in which more resilience can be built into something in the face of a cyber attack, and that we need to, in that structure of dealing with things, we need to put that level, that higher level, in place with certain parts of the council activity, and to a lower level at other parts, as you say, in a prioritisation format.
Sure. Did we want to take that away and the IT department come back with a comprehensive answer for this committee? Would that be okay, Councillor Smith? Thank you. I think what I get from this is nothing's gone up, but the highest risk, we've got 3, and I see balancing the budget and cyber incident that we're managing them. They're risks that could be managed, but we've got housing asset management and compliance, something that we can actually affect and influence. So would we see that risk decreasing within a certain time frame? And have we predicted a certain time frame for when we've got quite a lot of actions lined up to mitigate for the risks that are involved, is there a time frame for when we can see this to start to come down? Thank you. Anybody? Rob? Or did you want to take that away and then come back to the committee with, if there is a time frame, what actions are going to be put forward? There is a list of actions, but what's been implemented by what date, that we can see this to be tackled?
Okay, I can make an initial point that a lot of these kind of maintenance and compliance is very much tied up with the action points that we've kind of management team have put in place to mitigate the risk towards the HRA residual funds. So there is definitely a plan in place, and with regard timescales, I do not have that information, so I will report back on that.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the floor? Thank you for the report and thank you for the questions, councillors. This is to take to a vote.
Vote carried unanimously, Chair.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, councillors. We'll move on to item 13, date of the next meeting, 7 p.m, 2nd of October 2024. Item 14, any other urgent business to be dealt with in public? We don't have anything. 15, exclusion of the press and public, and we do not need that. And 16, any other urgent business to be dealt with in private? We don't have anything. So on that note, have a good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy the football.